I'm going to read Between a Rock and a Hard Place by Aron Ralston. This is for your Paper 1 English language exam. It may come up for question 4 and question 5. So the title, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, is an idiom, and it foreshadows that Aron Ralston will find himself in a predicament where any decision he makes will be a difficult one. It's a first-hand account, so he's going to do a number of things. He will be informing the reader of what takes place and also informing the reader on some terminology for climbing. He's going to explain how the situation unfolds, and especially when things turn for the worst, he will be describing that experience and the emotions that he goes through. I come to another drop-off. So we start with a detached tone. There doesn't seem to be any emotion here. So although the reader might find this situation quite scary, we don't sense that there's any nervousness from Aron Ralston, especially because he uses the word another, which tells us that, this is something he's done before. This one is maybe 11 or 12 feet high, a foot higher and of a different geometry than the overhang I descended 10 minutes ago. So we notice that he uses mathematical language or measurements. That's for a number of reasons. One, it gives the reader a clear vision of his environment and just how high he is. It also tells us something about him and the type of climber he is. So he's very conscious of the setting. He's taking everything in. So he's being really careful as well. But again, there's no emotion at this point, so he comes across as quite confident. Another refrigerated chockstone is wedged between the walls, 10 feet downstream from and at the same height as the ledge. It gives the space below the drop-off the claustrophobic feel of a short tunnel. Instead of the walls widening after the drop-off or opening into a bowl at the bottom of the canyon, here the slot narrows to a consistent 3 feet across at the lip of the drop-off and continues at that width for 50 feet down the canyon. So again, we have a lot of detail. So he's taking in his surroundings. So you can imagine he's working through kind of his next steps. So he is being very careful. But he seems confident at this stage. The word claustrophobic on line 4 does help create suspense, however, and may encourage the reader to start feeling quite nervous about this situation. However, I don't think it's sensed at this point that Aron Ralston feels nervous in any way. Sometimes in narrow passages like this one, it's possible for me to stem my body across the slot, with my feet and back pushing out in opposite directions against the walls. Controlling this counter pressure by switching my hands and feet on the opposing walls, I can move up or down the shoulder width crevice fairly easily as long as the friction contact stays solid between the walls of my hands, feet and back. This technique is known as stemming or chimneying. You can imagine using it to climb up the inside of a chimney. So we have positive language here. So again, this assured tone from Aron Ralston. We've got it's possible, I can. And also the use of expert language, stemming or chimneying, just really explains why he's feeling so confident, because he's clearly an experienced climber and knows what he's doing. Just below the ledge where I'm standing is a chockstone the size of a large bus tyre, stuck fast in the channel between the walls, a few feet out from the lip. If I can step onto it, then I'll have a 9-foot height to descend, less than that of the first overhang. I'll dangle off the chockstone, then take a short fall onto the rounded rocks piled on the canyon floor. So the use of the dependent clause here, if I can step onto it, shares with us the way that Aron Ralston works through his next steps, and that means he is being very careful. He's thinking through everything, and that gives a sense of him being in control, because he's taking his time to think about what's the best thing to do next. There is, however, the use of the phrase dangle off, like claustrophobic, it just helps create that suspense. So again, it's important to note he doesn't seem very nervous at this point. In the third paragraph, he again is using mathematical language as well, 9-foot height, for instance. But it may be encouraging the reader to feel fearful at this stage. Stemming across the canyon at the lip of the drop-off, with 1 foot and 1 hand on each of the walls, I traverse out to the chalk stone. I press my back against the south wall and lock my left knee, which pushes my foot tight against the north wall. With my right foot, I kick at the boulder to test how stuck it is. It's jammed tightly enough to hold my weight. I lower myself from the chimneying position and step onto the chalk stone. It supports me but teeters slightly. After confirming that I don't want to chimney down from the chalk stone's height, I squat and grip the rear of the lodged boulder, turning to face back up canyon. Sliding my belly over the front edge, I can lower myself and hang from my fully extended arms, akin to climbing down from the roof of a house. So throughout that paragraph, we should note that he is using active voice. So in other words, Aron is the subject of the sentence. I traverse, I press, I kick, I lower, I squat, I can. And that suggests that he feels in control. Everything that's happening is because he chooses for that to happen. And we're going to start to see that changes in the next paragraph. As I dangle, so again, we've got repetition. I haven't put repetition on here, but note that he's repeating the word dangle, and that just creates this sense of vulnerability. I feel the stone respond to my adjusting grip with a scraping quake as my body's weight applies enough torque to disturb it from its position. Instantly, I know this is trouble, and instinctively, I let go of the rotating boulder to land on the round rocks below. Now, this part's interesting. Instantly is a temporal expression and communicates to us that this happened very quickly. I haven't underlined it, but in the next line, so that would be line 31, we've also got the word instinctively. Now, before this, Aron Ralston has worked through his mind first what he's going to do and carefully planned out everything. So he's very much been in control. The fact that he now has to act instinctively suggests that he's not in control anymore, or that he doesn't have the luxury of thinking through anything very carefully. So he's going to become quite reactive to the situation rather than carefully planning out his actions. So I would underline instinctively here as well. And this may suggest that this is the turning point, because we're going to see how kind of the sentence types change from here on. So I haven't again put this in the margin, but maybe next to line 30, from instantly I know this is trouble, I would class this as the turning point. When I look up, the backlit chalkstone falling toward my head consumes the sky. So we've got personification here. Aron Ralston is definitely not in control now. We've got this image of the stone eating up the sky as it's getting closer and closer to him. So it really seems like actually the stone is in control, and Ralston is just reacting now to what the stone does. Fear shoots my hands over my head. So now we've gone from an active voice to a passive voice. Fear makes him move his hands. He doesn't choose. So if this was passive, it would say, I move my hands. But it doesn't. It says fear shoots my hands. So he's now not in control. Fear is kind of controlling and deciding what he does. So again, we've just got this idea that he's now out of control. And that's a contrast. So you might want to include that as structure. So we're starting to see a contrast in the sentence types. We had active voice and now we've changed to passive voice. I can't move backward or I'll fall over a small ledge. Note that now he's saying I can't. In the paragraph above, we've got I can. So again, that's also a contrast. Or I'll fall over a small ledge. My only hope is to push off the falling rock and get my head out of its way. So just the phrase only hope just helps highlight that his options are very, very limited. The next 3 seconds play out at a tenth of their normal speed. Time dilates as if I'm dreaming, and my reactions decelerate. The fact that time dilates suggests that he's in shock. In slow motion, the rock smashes my left hand against the south wall. My eyes register the collision, and I yank my left arm back as the rock ricochets. The boulder then crushes my right hand and ensnares my right arm at the wrist. Palm in, thumb up, fingers extended. The rock slides another foot down the wall with my arm in tow, tearing the skin off the lateral side of my forearm. So we have use of listening here to create this idea that everything's happening very quickly. Although time dilates, for Ralston, everything seems to move slowly, within that time actually a lot happens, and in real time things happen very quickly. Notice also language choice here. I haven't underlined rock smashes on line 36, but you might want to also underline smashes, crushes, ensnares, tearing, all very harsh verbs to communicate the pain that this would also cause. We also have alliteration, harsh sounding, the repeat of the k sound. So we've got I yank my left back as the rock ricochets. So just imagine that harsh sound as well, and what that's emphasising about kind of the pain that he'd be going through. And then after that really long list, we just have then silence. So it ends on that short sentence. Again, that's quite a suspenseful moment. My disbelief paralyses me temporarily as I stare at the sight of my arm vanishing into an implausibly small gap between the fallen boulder and the canyon wall. So we've got this continuation of the passive voice. My disbelief paralyses me. Again, he's not in control, his emotions are. And also the fact that he stares as well. I stare again, supports this idea that he's in shock. Within moments, my nervous system's pain response overcomes the initial shock. Good God, my hand. The flaring agony throws me into a panic. I grimace and growl. My mind commands my body, get your hand out of there. So we've got a number of things here. We've got grimace and growl, use of alliteration. I haven't written that down, and I should have in the margin. So line 45, grimace and growl. The alliteration of the gr sound reflects the sound that he'd probably make, actually, because he's in so much pain. The fact that his mind commands him, get your hand out of there. So we've got the use of dialogue as well as the use of the exclamation mark that helps emphasise this panic that he's going through. And then it follows with the fact that I yank my arm 3 times in a naive attempt to pull it out. So that's how desperate he is, that he thinks he can just yank his arm out. He even tries 3 times. So the verb yank helps kind of reflect that panic, as well as the fact that he does that 3 times. But I'm stuck. So again, we end with a short sentence to further highlight that his options are limited and there just seems to be a sense of hopelessness. Anxiety has my brain tweaking, so that's quite similar, a similar start to this paragraph to the one previous, my disbelief paralyses me. So again, we are using the passive voice. Searing hot pain shoots from my wrist up my arm. I'm frantic and I cry out. I didn't underline frantic, but it'd be worth doing that. Frantic and cry out just again supports this idea that at the moment he's panicking. My desperate brain conjures up a probably apocryphal story in which an adrenaline-stoked mom lifts an overturned car to free her baby. I'd give it even nod that it's made up, but I do know for certain that right now, while my body's chemicals are raging at full flood, this is the best chance I'll have to free myself with brute force. That's how desperate he is, that he's clinging on to what he thinks is probably a fictitious story of a mom being able to lift a car and free her child. But he's clinging on to that, and he's going to give it a go to see if he can do the impossible. And that's why it follows with, I shove against the large boulder, heaving against it, pushing my left hand lifting with my knees pressed under the rock. I get good leverage with the aid of a 12-inch shelf in front of my feet. Standing on that, I brace my thighs under the boulder and thrust upward, repeatedly grunting. So you might note there, I haven't put it in the margin, but again, it will be worth you making a note of it. He's gone back to the active voice. He's trying to take control. I shove. I get good. Okay, so here he's the one that's being active, but look what follows, which suggests that it was for nothing. Come on, move. So he's even encouraging himself. He's speaking to himself, shouting at himself, and again the use of the exclamation mark to show his kind of desperation and how he's really trying to encourage himself. So there we're full of hope. Is it going to work? And our hopes are let down by this one-word sentence, nothing, which again emphasises how limited his options are. And again, his situation just seems absolutely hopeless. Please look at a plan on your own. Don't just look at this and think, yeah, I'll do the same thing. You need to make sure that in your plan, you're comfortable in explaining the techniques that are used. This is just an idea. So the question 4, you are always asked about thoughts and feelings. So you might explore the fact that at the beginning he feels really confident. And then we see that turning point from the active to the passive voice where he loses control. He's no longer able to kind of think through his actions, and instead is quite reactive. And then finally, right at the end, we notice that he's very panicked as well through dialogue, exclamation marks, and so on.